If this is like an industry that you're interested in, and maybe you're a young kid in college that like wants to dive into youth sports on a business entrepreneurial level, I would say there's three things that like I've taken away over my years, and it's
All right, welcome back to another episode of Clubhouse Talks. Today we have on Michael Cervantes from Steelhead Lacrosse Club, Lake Forest College, and he's a club director at Steelhead Lacrosse Club. Michael, want to quickly introduce yourself in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, happy to be here and kind of just talking about all of this stuff. I'm a lead club director for Steelhead Lacrosse Club. We are essentially a full encompassing lacrosse club that provides off-season lacrosse training in the form of camps, clinics, league play, positional specialty training, recruiting assistance at the high school level, and of course, competitive travel teams.
Awesome. And try to give everyone like a kind of a scope of the organization, like the size of it, and your role within it, maybe like the staff involved, just so everyone kind of knows like the scale and kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have probably, about 10 to 12 different, competitive travel teams at all different ages now. Like I said, we run a handful of different camps, clinics, and leagues throughout the year as well. Essentially my role as, the club director is to make sure everything is, operating correctly, back end stuff is working smoothly, logistically we're where we need to be, and everything is set up for, essentially top to bottom throughout all of that. We have a great staff as well that helps with all of this stuff, including, not only, operations and logistics, but also, obviously on field staff and, part-time coaches and things of that nature. So, pretty general size. I wouldn't say we're, really big, but I also wouldn't say we're really small. We're a good size that we feel comfortable with right now.
Awesome. I feel like when you maybe talk to people outside of the industry of like sports world or youth sports world, they would hear about you and your program and think of like, hey, you coach and like that's what you do. It's like, well, there's so that's maybe like I don't know what percentage of it is just coaching kids, but there's maybe like 80% of it's like the operations and logistics and coordinating and funding and financing. So this will probably go more into that side of it, and less on the coaching side, which could probably be a whole nother show. But yeah, we'll dive into kind of like that 80%. Maybe you could tell me what maybe percentage of it is that side of it, but kind of get into the weeds of what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of like you said, I would say, yeah, I would say that 80% is probably a pretty solid percentage there of how much is planning and, back end and operations and marketing and, logistics and, handling a staff and, making sure everything is where it needs to be, on time, and, teams and, players are informed of where they need to be, at all times throughout the year. And of course, the coaching part is an extremely important, part for us, and, it's a high priority. But, that's 3 or 4 hours out of the week for a lot of our coaches. And, the other end of it is, like you said, the 80 to 90% of it is, making sure everything is where it needs to be and everyone is where they need to be. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's a lot that goes into, expectations of, what it means to run a club. And then, of course, the reality of it as well.
Yeah. And I just find that fascinating of like all the work that goes into it, and then like having to actually show up and coach and like be there present 100% for the players too. And it's a lot when you think about it and break it down. So I'll have three different topics we'll dive into over the course of this interview. The first part is just kind of like setting the landscape of one, like lacrosse in general, like how it is in the Midwest in Illinois, and what it was like kind of for you coming into more of a coaching role there. And then we'll get into youth sports and club sports in general. Again, landscape of it, and then lastly, marketing social strategies, because I feel like you guys do an awesome job, along with a lot of other Team Illinois programs, of just like having great content out there and interacting and building community. So to start and set the stage, I played lacrosse for one whole year, freshman year, high school, um, and just as a way maybe to do another sport in high school. And lacrosse was a fun sport for like kids that are athletes, maybe played a hockey or something else. It was growing for sure, but not predominant. I feel like it's been still growing steadily. Where was it at when you started coaching, and where is it at now? Has it changed at all in terms of popularity and
Yeah.
focus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. So I've been coaching now. I'm gonna try not to age myself too much, but I've been coaching for about 14 years now. You know, really, as soon as I was kind of like senior in high school, freshman in college, I started coaching. You know, youth kids. You know, rec league. You know, and
Where'd you go to high
so
school again?
14 years. So I went to high school at St. Vitor,
Okay.
right here in Illinois. So yeah, so you know, lacrosse has been around for a while now, kind of in the northern suburbs of Chicago, kind of where Steelhead is based out of. But you know, over the last 10 years, it's really exploded kind of all over the state. Like I was saying, I played back in the early 2000s at St. Vitor High School here in Illinois. And, you know, back then, you know, you didn't even really know what the sport was till you got to high school. And honestly, a lot of the kids that ended up playing the sport was either one, you know, they were a hockey kid and it just translated really well. And, you know, the lacrosse coach knew they were hockey kids. So he kind of just recruited them over. Or you were a baseball kid and you got cut from the team and then you needed something to do during the spring. So like that's essentially where when I was in high school, that's kind of what the landscape looked like. Now you have rec teams and community teams in almost every town playing lacrosse. You know, starting at 7, 8 years old, and almost every high school sponsors it now as a varsity sport, and they have multiple JV and varsity levels, and it's really been amazing to kind of just see that growth, especially as somebody from this area where like I said back in the day it was like it was just a kind of a thing your high school offered, and you kind of just learned about it then. But now kids are starting at little tyke ages, so it's been great to see.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome to see. I'm just seeing mostly through the lens of social media and following you guys. Gone to a couple of tournaments, but it's cool to see the young ages getting involved in it. Before I ask this next question, how long have you been at Steelhead?
So Steelhead is fairly new. We're kind of the new kids on the block when it comes to like a off-season travel club program. We have only been in existence for we are going on, this is year 3, but we haven't finished yet. So really, we've only been around since June of 2021.
Okay.
And I came in kind of like at ground level. So when I came in, we kind of still didn't exist technically. We hadn't launched. We hadn't announced we were going to be a program yet. We had the brand design, and we kind of had our target geography, but that was really it. We hadn't really launched or kind of had a strategy yet of like, what do we want this to look like? So I kind of came in at ground level, and me and a couple other guys kind of just helped kind of get it going.
Yeah. Okay, so then take me back to like 3 years ago. You've had a good amount of coaching experience now under your belt, and you have this opportunity, like you said, to be at ground level, almost like a founding person at this club, maybe even that. And how were you seeing Steelhead? Like, what was your visions for it? What were you passionate about? Like, what were you excited to kind of jump in and get going with it? What was your visions kind of laid out when you got started?
Yeah, honestly, like what my strategy was, and why we kind of started Steelhead to begin with was, first there were a lot of other travel programs out there already, and we just felt as a group that kind of our geographic area, and that area being kind of like the northern suburbs of the Chicagoland area, the Vernon Hills, the Libertyville, the Mundelein, if you're familiar with those areas. That was kind of our target geographic area when we launched, and we thought it had been ignored kind of for kind of far too long, for as long as lacrosse has kind of been in those areas. We wanted to help provide a top tier training atmosphere and top tier coaching without these families having to drive 45 minutes to over an hour to really get that. And that's kind of what they had been doing for years and years and years. So we wanted to, that's kind of essentially why we launched because we wanted to provide top tier training and top tier coaching to these families kind of in their own backyard, so they didn't have to travel for it.
Gotcha.
That was kind of focus number one with Steelhead, and kind of why we're doing this. And then once we kind of figured that out, and we figured out we want to do this, we built the foundation of Steelhead on what we kind of call our 5 C's, and that stands for culture, community, consistency, communication, and commitment. And that's really what we focused on, right when we launched, and to this day is those were our two focuses. We're gonna focus on our area, and making sure we're providing everything we possibly can for our area, and then we're gonna focus on culture. We're going to focus on community, and giving back, and being involved in the community programs kind of in our area. We're going to focus on consistency, just being consistent from what we offer, when we offer it, how we offer it. We're going to be consistent in our communication. We're going to make sure we're over communicating and providing every detail we possibly can, so our families are always informed. And then lastly, just commitment, our commitment to our families, our commitment to our players. And then, of course, the commitment we expect from, players and families when they, register or sign up for us as well. So it was kind of twofold there, but, that was really it. We didn't really care about anything else except, building our club on these foundations, and, whatever came from it was what we were going to run with.
It sounds, kind of pick this up as you were speaking on like the 5 C's and then relating it back to the players, to you. Like, it seems like by you being so purposeful and direct with like what you were going to provide to this community of people, and kind of like your promises to them, setting your own standard of like, this is how we're running things, you kind of in turn almost demand that out of your participants from it, because you're holding yourself at that level, so that you're looking for your players, one, to show up in that same way, and like on field have that sort of dedication. In the same way too, probably you're hoping the parents reflect the same way, that like they're going to respect you for what you do and kind of reciprocate. Whereas I could see if your program is not run as detail oriented as that, or maybe is not focused as that, and more as like play as you go, you'll kind of get that same sort of response from your parents and players. That I feel like I kind of like what I picked up from the end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, at the end of the day, you're providing a service, right, for these families and for these players, and they have an expectation, just like we have an expectation of, the commitment level, and what we expect from our players and families as well. So exactly what you're saying, it goes both ways. And I think we've, like I said, we've built ourselves kind of on these 5 C's, and it's kind of helped be our foundation, and we've leaned on it heavily throughout the last 3 years, and we feel like it's paid off.
Yeah, and I always try to relate things back to like, for like our business listeners, like our entrepreneurs and stuff, is like, in terms of running a business, like if say I'm a clubhouse, if I'm holding my business to a certain level of expectations of how we're going to deliver our service, of maybe like certain level of product or a certain level of quality and design and all these different things, or turnaround times, our customers tend to treat us better in terms of like they're going to find the ways to help us deliver good product versus if we are loosey goosey with how we're delivering our services and kind of with our timelines. Customers are going to treat us the same. They're going to pay us late. They're going to, give us crappy reviews and things like that. So standards you hold yourself for your customers tend to be reciprocated if you have if you're doing it consistent enough. That's a interesting insight. I'm taking it
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
selfishly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, consistency is key in this industry. I think has been something I've learned along the way is that the more and more you can be consistent and the more and more you can communicate and, over communicate it's always going to go on the better spectrum than if you're inconsistent and you don't communicate and that's where things kind of start to fall off. So like I said, we've leaned heavily kind of on that foundation and we feel good about it.
This may be pushing you. Tell me if you can't answer this straight, but for someone who's like starting a youth club, I would say like five C's. It's an impressive one that you've got like that laid out and okay, here's the 5 things we're gonna like layer things on. But if somebody's going to start a program, you got to pick one of those. Like, hey, when you start, like day one, at least just get this right, and then start building on top of it in terms of like to start a successful program. Which of those do you think is most important to laying a good foundation for a successful program?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you could look at it a couple different ways, right? I think you could look at it of, you know, what you're going to provide on field, right? Like if you fully dive into just focus on what you're going to provide on field, I would say that's culture, right? You want a good culture with your players, you want a good culture with your families, you want a good culture with your coaching staff, your full-time staff, whoever's involved in this club that you're essentially starting from possibly nothing. Culture is king. And that's something I've learned along the way from a lot of peers that I've worked with as well in this industry is that if you can really provide a top tier culture atmosphere, a lot of other things are going to fall in line and go your way if you're doing things the right way, treating people the right way, making sure you kind of demand those things essentially from your players as well, on the field, off the field, and then your coaches as well, right? Just continuing to surround yourself with good coaches who care about culture, who care about you know building these young athletes as more than just athletes on the field, right? Where we care about what they do off the field as well and what they're doing in school and, in the community and stuff like that. So, if you're going to lean on one thing, I would say, out of all 5 of the C's, I would say your culture. If you go all in with prioritizing your culture, a lot of the other things are gonna kind of fall your way and probably do okay. Now from that could be your on field and kind of hoping all of that goes that way. You could also look at it from kind of the more entrepreneur business perspective of your communication needs to be the priority sometimes. And like I think that's the hardest part of kind of answering that question, is that sometimes within those 5 C's, one over the other is more important on the day, right? The
Mm-hmm.
consistency sometimes is priority over the other things, right? So but if I was going to pick one, I would say the culture and kind of how I explain that of if you surround the program with good culture and you prioritize that, a lot of other things are going to go your way.
Yeah, I think and I culture like I obviously it's important words come up a few different times in these interviews I've done, and so I try to like pick it apart because it could be a buzzword and it could be kind of like it could fall flat because a lot of times people use it incorrectly. And so I like to try to pick it apart from different people to get their view on it. And it's also so hard to measure like consistency. You could say, okay, we are, getting back to all of our parents in 12 hours or something like that. Like culture is so hard to measure too. So I think for like a program that's starting out, like people and community side of it, like that culture is like, if you have that going, if you come to a group of parents and say like, hey, like here's our coaching staff that like are like my buddies, like I'm close with them, they're friends, we're in this, we're going to be locked in. Like if nothing else, like we don't win a game and things are a mess, like you have a group of guys that care about this, like that could be a selling point. And then like parents are with you to help that grow. Like for example, if I when I started the business, I was more so like my founding thing was more so like at the end of the day, no one's going to say that Clubhouse like just doesn't like follow through. Like at the end of the day, like if something were to mess up, like we might produce bad product. I'm not going to guarantee every product's going to be right out the gate, but I'm going to promise like we're going to see everything through and like be at the ground level and figure out the solutions. And so like when you start a business, you hope everything goes right, but you have to kind of like accept that things are going to go wrong and what's going to be the one thing that like you're going to hold on to. So for us, it was just like we're going to follow through on things. We're going to make the best possible product, but if something goes wrong, we'll see it through, and then build on it. So when we told our customers that, they liked the honesty, and then they were with us to help like remedy those problems, and they'd rather work with us to remedy those problems versus us try to do everything at once and then fall flat in all of them. So it's like starting the program, I'm seeing the culture side of it as a founding thing. And if you were to start a club and tell parents like, here's what we're doing really well, hope if you're wrong for this ride, like we'll get these other things along the way. I think the transparency to people when you're starting a club could go a long way. And culture, it's like definitely, it sounds like the number one thing you could do to get buy-in from parents, players, staff. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, sometimes it's thrown around kind of like in the industry as a buzzword, and like it's one thing to slap it on your website and say you focus on it, and it's another thing to like actually like push that within your program, and push that within your players' mindsets, your coaches' mindsets, your parent mindsets. So yeah, we try to focus on it pretty heavily, and that's that, like you said, that goes anything from culture on the back end of like what we're going to provide you from a service perspective of like we're gonna be consistent, we're gonna over communicate, we're gonna be committed to you along this journey, however long you're here for, and then from a player perspective, it's how we act when we're on the field, it's how we act when we're off the field, it's how we act in the classroom, when we're out with buddies, when we're going to a school dance. It's we try to bring a lot more to practice and to our teams that dive a little bit deeper, more than just playing lacrosse. And we've said that to our players in the past as well, as like we love all you guys, no matter who you are or what type of person you are, or how great your lacrosse skills are, but at the end of the day, one day lacrosse ends for everybody, right? Unfortunately, there's probably there's barely a professional league, and the 1% that's playing in it, right, might not do it for forever. So at the end of the day, we care a lot more who you are as a person, and what that looks like off the field, right? So that's kind of how we push culture, and kind of how we prioritize it with our players and our families.
Yeah. And kind of the way I see that you guys kind of established Steelhead was like you saw this gap in the market of like this area that had not really been fully fulfilled with like youth lacrosse, and then you filled that market with what you believe to be like the best possible product and built that out from there. I would say like for anybody starting like a different club or a different business, like you just got to find what your guarantee is. Like I've read this book Traction, and they say like when you're starting out especially, you need like your guarantee. Like this is what you're telling customers you're going to do. Try to do everything else, but like this is your guarantee. For you guys, it seems like culture probably would be it, but you guys are guaranteeing five seats. Like this is what our standard is, and that helps you communicate to
Yeah.
to a new community of who you are, and allows them to like buy in to what you're doing. So I think the biggest thing that probably helps with you guys and anybody else is like if you're starting something new, clearly communicate what who you are and what your guarantee is, so that people can start to buy in with you, and then build around what your other things you're trying to do around it. So I love that, like the Steelhead, again, the 5 C's is an impressive 5 guarantees to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe a little over guaranteeing, but at the same time, it's what we decided to kind of found ourselves on, and we've done a good job of it. We've done a really good job, and that's not just me. That's my coaches, and then of course like the parents and the families have really bought into it as well. So we've found it to be a good thing.
Yeah. All right. So get into lacrosse specifically. We're getting like youth sports in general a little bit too in this topic, but like as far as the lacrosse landscape goes, I've always been confused by like all the different clubs, the town teams, the club teams, the high school teams, the academy teams. And I think it's because there's just been like you said, a boom of the sport. And so there's just like a lot of different ways to go about playing because everyone's just trying to like doing their own things. It seems like we're kind of building their own ways to do it. So, in your best synopsis, like how is the lacrosse youth sports, lacrosse youth clubs laid out?
Yeah, so the one thing that I've found to be different than like how youth soccer and youth hockey is laid out is that youth soccer and youth hockey usually have a governing body that kind of oversees like league structure and everything that goes into it, and lacrosse is kind of not like that. There is like US lacrosse that kind of like oversees lacrosse and kind of has like general guidebooks and rule books and things of that nature, but they don't really like oversee how youth lacrosse is run, right? So it's kind of been I think just a snowball effect of just like I said in the past of the growth and the boom of it, but also just kind of like when does it usually get played and how does it usually get played, and where do you usually play it, right? So to kind of backtrack a little bit more, usually, you have your rec program, your community program, right? So for instance, if I lived in Vernon Hills and, my son wanted to play lacrosse, there would be the Vernon Hills Lacrosse Club, and they would operate usually springtime, so like from the months of March, April into like late May, Memorial Day weekend. And that's usually when you play lacrosse with your community team, just like if you signed up for, Park District Baseball. Same thing. It's a spring sport, so that's usually when it's played with the community levels, and then also at the high school levels. That's when you play with your high schools as well, from the months of March to kind of that end of May, early June. Now there's also a plethora of just off-season options, right? So for that parent that is interested in lacrosse, and it might be August or it might be September, your rec program may or may not be offering lacrosse at that time, right? Because it's a spring sport. So if that parent is interested in lacrosse, in those months or maybe in the winter months, that's where you would probably end up, joining, like a Steelhead lacrosse club, where we might be, providing a fall camp or a fall clinic or a winter clinic. And that might be your first experience with lacrosse. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing club with us. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're on a travel team. That just might be your first introduction to lacrosse, because you are still waiting for the springtime to play with your Park District team, right? So that's kind of how the nuances of it have been run, for the longest time. And then let's say you do play with your rec Park District program, your community team, and then that ends in May, and then you decide you loved it, you want to keep playing it. That's where again, Steelhead would come back in the summertime, and be like, yeah, we have summer camp and we have clinics and we have, that's when our travel teams play, and that's how you would probably end up being within our program, on the competitive side of like, you're gonna go play in tournaments and you're going to practice every week because, you really enjoyed it and you want to deep dive into it. But, we don't run, the clubs that we're kind of like, in tandem with, we don't run spring training from a Steelhead perspective. We completely shut down our club during the springtime because we want all of our players to play with their communities. We want all of our players to play with their high schools. We want all of our players to go play with their neighbors and their friends from school and their buddies down the road. We want them to play with their communities to really just keep building lacrosse in the communities and building the high school programs as well, because all those youth kids that are playing for their community teams are one day eventually going to feed into the high school programs, right? And we want that to be consistent. We want that to stay as long as possible. It's a little bit different from possibly like a soccer model, right? Whereas like the top soccer players at the high school age might opt out of playing for your high school because you have a really great opportunity to play for your club on a more national level during that time, whereas club lacrosse stops completely for the community programs, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting. Is that like a gentleman's agreement? It stops. Is that like USA Lacrosse like the thing, or is it more so just something that your programs, the ones you work with, do? How's that decided upon?
Yeah, I think it's a gentleman's agreement. I think it's just kind of how it's always been, and I think again, lacrosse has really only recently exploded in kind of popularity. So I don't think it necessarily had that kind of pool to be like that early on to kind of do the soccer model of like we're just going to take the best kids all the time all year long and expose them
Mm-hmm.
on a national level. A lot of kids get national exposure through playing with their high schools for lacrosse, and that's how that's kind of stayed consistent. And then at the youth level, yeah, I think it's kind of just been a gentleman's agreement that everybody in the lacrosse industry that maybe does a travel club or does some sort of providing a service for lacrosse has kind of just understood that's where our players need to play during the spring, right? And honestly, that also from a business perspective, right? That's how we survive, right? If more kids aren't playing community level lacrosse, then they're probably just not playing. So if they're not getting involved at the community level where there's, low barrier of entry, cost is low, the community programs are possibly providing all the equipment for you. And, that's really your kind of like, your introduction to lacrosse, like, at the park down the road with the park district program, like then you probably aren't playing. And then, you aren't going to have that opportunity, to play travel. And that's where, Steelhead then doesn't exist, right? So from a business perspective, it's also just it's good in general for these kids to keep playing with communities and for us to help support those communities because those are the ones that are going to end up playing travel lacrosse. So, I think it's a gentleman's agreement, but, I think it's also kind of just a win-win for, both sides from, just looking at it on a business perspective of like, communities need to keep growing, they need to keep offering lacrosse, we need to help support it, and then in tandem those kids are going to want more lacrosse, and then that's where we come in. So I think that's kind of just how it's always been, but at the same time I think everyone sees the benefit of that as well.
Yeah. So almost like maybe trying to monopolize that into club sport, it would kill the market essentially. It would kill the growth of the game. And keeping a community base allows like parents just low barrier to entry and getting into the sport. That's interesting. I hope it stays that way. I don't like about soccer is that the players are being torn into academy teams and then they away from the even though soccer is an established sport, I do think it's killing the sport in a way of like you're not getting as much of like a buy-in from the town because kids are trying to leave the town as best as possible to get to the academy team if they're seriously playing. Do you see lacrosse going there if it gets bigger? I mean, by way of like just capitalism, I feel like it could, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are definitely programs out there that are if not already doing it, want to do it. And we've seen that across the industry. Maybe not here in Illinois so much, but we've seen it kind of throughout the country that you know people are trying to offer travel teams when they should maybe be playing for their community teams, or whatever that may be. And like honestly, like it's not always bad either, right? Like I think a lot of times, like some of the higher caliber players want just high caliber training and high caliber competition at all times to kind of keep pushing themselves. And that's what the players think is best for them, and that's what the families think is best for them. And like no one can knock that. Like
Right.
they're not wrong technically, right? Like technically you should be wanting to get the best training and the best competition you possibly can at all times. Like that's just a competitive nature in players that are top caliber. But at the same time, there's definitely ways to just be able to accomplish both, and support your community as well. But yeah, there are people out there trying to do it, and they're I think the people that are trying to do it are seeing glimpses of success, because like I said, those top caliber players are kind of like leaning a little bit more towards that type of style of training in the spring community time. But the plethora of players they want to play with their buddies, they want to play with their neighbors, they want to play with their friend that goes to the same middle school and elementary school, and the parents want to hang out with their family friends in town and stuff like that. So I think it's possible. I don't think it's beyond us as a industry, because we've seen it in other sports, and like lacrosse is kind of like the new kid on the youth sports block. So like if basketball's finding success in it, and hockey's finding success in it, and soccer's finding success in it, it's only a matter of time before someone in the lacrosse world decides to kind of go against the grain and go, well, it's working in all the other sports, so like why can't we do it, right? Why can't
Mm-hmm.
we do travel club during the high school season, and just make super teams and just take them somewhere where we can compete? The only thing is that there's nowhere for you to compete, right? Like there are
Right.
no spring high school national level events, because the mantra is just you're probably playing with your high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, I think, where there, yeah, you might be doing like springtime travel club, top tier coaching training, but you're not really competing with your travel club, because there's really nowhere for you to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really providing like more national exposure, for like college coaches or something like that. College coaches love going to the East Coast high school games, because the competition is just so high. So like right now I don't think there's necessarily a need for it, but again, to answer the question, is it could happen.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of where lacrosse is going, I feel like lacrosse has always been synonymous with like grow the game and like fastest growing sport, and like that's kind of like what I've been told like growing up and stuff like that was like it's coming. And I still feel like that's kind of the mantra with it. Are you finding that you're more like in terms of Steelhead and getting players to join in? Are you still trying to as a industry grow the market together and it's more like collaborative, like the more kids playing lacrosse the better? Or is it starting to get to where okay, a lot of kids are playing lacrosse and clubs are getting pretty competitive about trying to get kids to play different clubs?
Yeah, no, I mean, our sole focus is just to continue to keep growing the game. As cliche as that might sound. But like I kind of alluded to a little earlier, with kind of like why we help support the community programs, and why we think it's a good thing for, spring players to, go to those and, play during the spring, is that it helps our business too, right? Like if we don't help put sticks in hands, whether that's us running introductory camps and clinics that we currently do through park districts, or supporting the local community team in town. If we're not doing those things, then people aren't playing lacrosse. And as much as it's boomed and it's the fastest growing sport, it's still so small in comparison to football and basketball and the mainstay sports, baseball. Like, yes, the growth has been exponential compared to those sports, but if you look at the statistics, like for instance just IHSA statistics across the board, participation is still double, triple, quadruple than lacrosse. And like that's still just a testament to like we're still new and we still need to grow and we still need to help create that market. There's only so many travel club players to market to, right? Like not everybody is a travel level club player. So we have to do our best to kind of essentially like create those players, right? We have to help create our own market and we have to help create our own clientele. And we do that really by helping the communities and helping the park districts and helping put sticks in hands, at whatever age that may be. Some players, pick up a stick for the first time at 14, 15 years old as a freshman in high school. And then of course there's the other ones that start at 7, 8 year old because a neighbor down the block plays it and he sees him outside all the time. So it's definitely a grow the game mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you focused on the other side of it, of if you only focused on travel club level players and you only focused on the top tier guys and didn't necessarily focus so much on the introductory level players, you'll find that there's not that many up there. I mean, yes, there are a lot of top tier players, especially in the state now, which is amazing to see. But there's like you said, there's inter club competition and there's a lot of other clubs going on. So, they're kind of spread out everywhere. We have some, other
Mm-hmm.
clubs have some, right? So, and that's great to have those players within your club and to, kind of essentially earn the right to have those guys. But we have to continue to help grow our own market, and that doesn't start with the top tier guys. That starts with the community level, intro players that we're helping really just love the game. We're helping them love lacrosse first before we try to market them to play 12 months out of the year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's been our focus and will be our focus is grow the game, as like I said, as cliche as that is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there will always be competition amongst clubs, but it sounds like growing the pie versus competing for pieces of the current pie is like more the mindset of like, if another club is getting like recognition and growing the sport, like that's only going to get kids in other towns to see it and be interested and ultimately grow the sport. Makes it interesting. In terms of like the lacrosse competing with other sports, I've heard from like, for example, like basketball uh, clients that we work with. They're like, oh, kids are opting out or like missing games of practices because they want to play baseball right now. It's big baseball season for like Mundelein. And so they're competing against like other sports. And so some sports are trying to be like, I would say trying to take over certain seasons, or some sports are trying to pitch kids to play over other sports. When I was going to high school, lacrosse was starting to become a primary sport for some players, but most of them it was a secondary sport and they played other things. Are you seeing more primary lacrosse athletes coming in to high school? Is that something that's been a focus in terms of maybe not like turning kids away from other sports, but making it more of a popular sport that is becoming a primary sport for those athletes?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're definitely not trying to convince young athletes to like stop playing other sports, kind of like what you alluded to. And I would say majority of our program has multi-sport athletes. Guys that play football in the fall, guys that play basketball in the winter, guys that do wrestling in the winter, guys that do other things during the fall. So we have many multi-sport athletes, and honestly we highly encourage it, right? Like, don't get me wrong, as much as I would love to see our guys, all year round and, make sure, they're training the way we want them to train. Sometimes it's good for these guys to just, take a break from lacrosse as much as maybe we don't want them to, but it's good for them to go play football for 2 or 3 months and, do that and not necessarily like focus too heavily on lacrosse. And then, when they come to us in the winter or when they come to us in the summer, they're energetic, they're ready to go, they're all in, they're not tired from playing lacrosse all year, right? Like, and I think that's what we've seen a lot more of is, yes, don't get me wrong, we still have the guys that play year round, and that's definitely becoming way more of a thing than it was in the past. Guys making lacrosse their primary sport and kind of doing that every month of the year, which is great. They love it and they're all in, and they love that sport, and we love that they love it, and that's what it is, right? And we're happy to train and offer that all year round. And and that's kind of what we service. But at the same time, like we do not tell guys that they need to stop playing football, by any means, because we want to train them in the fall. Usually what we actually do is we actually try to schedule around other sports. That way, let's say it is the fall and guys do play football, but they also don't want to put their sticks down, right? They don't want to put their lacrosse sticks down. They want to keep training at least 1 or 2 days a week. We try to accommodate that, and we try to make that work. For instance, for high school football guys, we practice on Sundays in the fall because we want them to participate. We want them to play lacrosse because they want to play lacrosse. But they also have a commitment to football, and they love football, and they want to do that. And we love that about them. So we practice on Sundays when there is no football, and we don't start till October, and our tournaments aren't till November when football season's over already, right? So we try to do our best to accommodate all of that. But yeah, we're seeing a big spectrum, right? I think in our general area, like our geographic area of Mundelein, Vernon Hills, Libertyville, Antioch, Gurnee, like we still have a lot of multi-sport athletes. I wouldn't say the majority is by any means year-round lacrosse players, but we are starting to see that like slow shift of like, you know oh, I don't want to play football this year because I really loved, lacrosse over the summer. So I want to keep doing it in the fall, right? Or, whatever that is. But like,
Mm-hmm.
we leave that to the families.
Yeah.
If they want to play more, we offer it. If they can't play during a certain season, as long as they're, upfront about that and tell us the conflicts, we're all good with it. We'll figure it out for you because we want you to play lacrosse, even though you're participating in another sport. Because technically, we're always the off season, right? Like we don't provide in season training, right? The in season training is during the spring, and that's again the communities in the high school. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, we're always off season training. So like if you're doing something in the fall because that's the main season for that sport, that's up to you.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So I'll end this topic with like speaking to somebody in a growing. I mean, everyone's in a growing lacrosse market. Lacrosse in general is growing. Nothing too established yet. But being someone that has been with Illinois lacrosse for how many years? You've seen it grow. You've been a part of organizations to help it grow. Part of the team Illinois helping with coordinate tournaments. Somebody that is in a newer market of lacrosse, what's your experience in growing the game? Are you guys put on like awesome tournaments, like this community tournament you have coming up with Team Illinois? Like, what's your advice in like specific events that you think have helped grow the sport in Illinois? I mean, you guys are a great impact on the sport of Illinois by all the different programs Team Illinois runs. You speaking to a Michael Cervantes in what's a growing market? I don't know, across that's not too established. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just understanding if lacrosse is being offered in that area, right? I think you have to kind of like you have to work in tandem with people that have already been there doing what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to provide a service to enhance, kind of what's already there essentially. And again, you don't exist without working collaboratively with people that have kind of already been there, right? So I think first and foremost you have to figure out if lacrosse is being offered in your area that you're trying to kind of, start something in. And then if it is being offered already, great. Then you need to go out of your way to, you know, connect and figure out how to work collaboratively, and how to help with resources, and whatever that may be. You might be the end all be all of all knowledge of whatever you're trying to start. If it is lacrosse, you're an amazing coach, and you have all this experience, and you have this amazing resume. Share it. Like that is what helps build that, that network, and honestly, that trust between possibly a community program that's already been there, by you offering your services of how can we help you, without really wanting anything back. I think that's first and foremost. You have to understand your market. You have to understand the territory that you're in from a business perspective, and then you have to make sure that you're working collaboratively with community programs aren't necessarily like your competition from like a travel club perspective. You're doing different things. So again, from like a business perspective, you have to collaboratively network with these people to kind of make sure that there's trust within that territory, right? That's one aspect.
Mm-hmm.
The second is, if there is nothing in that area, what we've found, a lot of success in, and like you've brought up, Team Illinois as a whole is, go to your local park district and figure out how to offer it. If you open up a lacrosse, or if you open up a park district pamphlet for the seasons, right? They have a summer, they have a spring, they have a fall and winter, and if you notice that there's no lacrosse in there, be the ones to offer it. Go to your local park district and say, hey, this is who we are, this is our expertise, we notice that you guys don't have this programming in your park district, and we'd love to do it. And again, that's not a money grab from a business perspective. Like, that's not what's going to help build your business from a bottom line aspect, but that's going to help build a community and build interest in lacrosse, and that's going to help offer introductory level, low barrier entry clinics, and camps, and whatever that may be. But you're the ones providing the service, and you're the ones putting lacrosse sticks in kids' hands for the first time. And if you're doing things like that on a ground level, it's going to pay off in the long run. We have actually, like, we have a handful of players that play in our travel club now, 3 years later, that started in a park district clinic for the first time, never played lacrosse before, ever. And they loved it. It's, and it's not supposed to be anything but, figuring out if you love lacrosse. Like, it's not, it doesn't have to be hardcore training, and it doesn't have to be, a ton of structure. It's just, hey, here's a stick, here's some simple concepts and fundamentals, and then let's play some games. And we've found a lot of success in that, and Team Illinois as a whole has found a lot of success in that. And lastly is just continuing to figure out how to put more sticks in hands. And something we're extremely excited about that we just launched this past month is our Guppies program. And essentially what that is that's going to start this summer, and that's a Steelhead program that we kind of founded, and it's going to be an 8-week program for kindergartners all the way through second grade. We're going to provide the equipment, we're going to provide the sticks, we're going to provide the practice uniforms, and we're going to provide our professional coaches. And like 50% of the sessions are going to be fundamentals, and working on things that are going to help you grow as a lacrosse player. But the other 50% of the session is going to be playing games, and getting up and down the field, and just running around and enjoying it, right? And so we're excited about that program, and that'll be the first time we've offered something at the 5-year-old, 6-year-old level. And it's going to be complete chaos, but it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be the first time these kids are playing lacrosse, and we're excited to be the people putting the sticks in their hands for the first time. So,
Yeah.
all of these things go into the community building and the collaborations, and how are we promoting the sport, and where are we finding success in promoting it.
Yeah. I know we're over our thing. Do you have like 15 more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. To quickly jump into a few of those things. One, if someone's looking to start growing lacrosse program in a growing market, talk about collaborating with established people already doing it. I think somebody that's starting anything, like starting a new business, you might look at people that are already doing it as competition and try to like avoid them or directly target them and like take people away, which you're just killing the market of what you're trying to build. And so obviously the approach there is backwards. And especially in a growing market, that's the beauty of a growing market. You can work together to like make a bigger market and more interesting, and ultimately grow a business that way. So I thought that was really interesting. Of like when you're starting something, instead of trying to beat other people, work with other people, and hear from them. Like they're going to give you information, and like there's a lot to learn that way of doing it. So that was an interesting point. And then you mentioned about if there isn't anybody there, you have to like literally make the market and going to those park districts and just trying to introduce the game. You might be discouraged and say, "Oh, lacrosse isn't a big sport here. I can't start a program." It's like, well, you could be the person to get that to be a bigger sport. That could be a whole nother, I feel like, interview talking about how Team Illinois has worked with park districts to like introduce a new sport. I have a lot of questions about that. That was really interesting. And then lastly, the other one was just putting sticks in hands is the Guppies program. I probably looked like a Guppy like my freshman year of high school trying to play the game, but I'd love to see videos of the kindergartners with sticks. That sounds amazing. But I think it's just like normalizing the sport too is a big thing for young kids to be able to see it and like be comfortable with it. Like again, for me, starting lacrosse freshman year, I had no idea what was going on. A little bit intimidated, and so it was hard for like anybody to join in that late when you've already maybe feel comfortable in baseball or soccer or something like that. So I thought those were super interesting and like tangible advice for somebody starting in a new program. The last thing I want to touch on was in the marketing and social strategies. Steelhead, first of all, it's got great logos, great colors, super fun to work with, and then the social media aspect of it is really interesting. And I think that lacrosse in general has like awesome logos, and they have fun with their jerseys, and that helps like bring in. As like surface level as it is, kids get excited about like merch and things like that, and it helps bring in eyeballs. Talk to me about like Steelhead from social media, like from a look perspective, and all that.
Yeah. So, first off, like I said, the brand was kind of already created. So the logo, the colors, all of that was done by a design guy that was also a lacrosse guy. Here in Illinois, he's actually moved away now. He's no longer in the area, but he killed it. He did a phenomenal job. It had great background. It had great contrast. It had great colors, logos, emblems. The shield is awesome. So first off, I walked into a great brand that was created already. So I was lucky enough to have that already kind of given to me.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, I essentially figured out how to just handle, all of the Steelhead marketing and the Steelhead social media content. And, by no means do I assume myself an expert in any of those fields. However, I do understand the importance of it. I think personally, it's our first impression. And then past our first impression, it's our current impression, right? Like if someone currently goes to go look at that. They want to see what's going on. They want to see what's happening right now. And that might be, again, that might be your first impression, but that also might be like, you coming back to us to see what's been going on, even though you already knew we existed, right? So people these days are, they're not seeing your website or your homepage first. They're seeing your social media accounts first, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your TikToks, right? Like that's what all the kids are seeing first. That's what, I mean, realistically, parents are also on that level now too. So like that's just the day and age we're living in, and that's where we kind of just, we try to keep consistency, and we try to keep, you know, engagement high, and content. Again, it's hard to consistently pump out content, daily, but
Yeah.
we try to do the best we possibly can to, make sure we have stuff from, events or practices or, tournaments that are going on, to where we can kind of stretch that material. And we've been pretty fortunate to work with some great people, that have helped, provide a lot of, high quality, photos and high quality videos for us. And the strategy has been pretty simple. It's create quality and consistent content. And that's essentially our delivery on our media pages. And I'm not exactly sure how much that like actually drives numbers, like from an analytical data perspective of like, did this did this video highlight drive a new player to sign up for us, right? Like I don't really measure it that way. I measure it more just from a brand awareness perspective. I look at it from a we're bringing another level of engagement to our brand, and also we're just bringing a level of professionalism to our brand. Like it's one thing to post all the time, but it's another thing to post high quality content all the time, right? And I think those are the biggest differences. And there are plenty of programs out there that don't post a lot, and maybe it's from a coach's phone from practice, and they do great. They have great, coaching, and they have great teams, and they're competitive, and they do well. And that's awesome. We just felt like, as a new kid on the block, we wanted to make sure we were launching and then being consistent throughout our kind of like small tenure here, of just being professional and bringing brand awareness to, like you said, our awesome logos and our awesome colors and our uniforms, and our awesome helmets. And like that, again, like you said, that's all surface level, and it's like, yeah, it's awesome, it's flashy, it's cool that the kids get excited about it, but like, really, it's just brand awareness for us. It's just we want people to know who we are, and that we exist, and that like, they can expect something from us, right? And what they should expect is, awesome content, professional content, high quality, great photos, and video reels. And honestly, the last part to all of that is like, our players love it. Like they enjoy sharing it, they enjoy posting it on their Instagrams, and getting the pictures and posting them, themselves, or
Hmm.
sharing the highlight that we made of them. And that's for us, that's just another level of engagement at a more organic traffic level, right? Like those kids have friends and friends and friends in their circles and their high schools, and if they're posting it and they're sharing it, right, like we're just getting organic engagement, just purely off of that. So there's a lot of tiers to it, but again, the strategy is pretty simple. Just create quality and consistent content.
Yeah. I mean, it's you guys are doing well. You're doing that. A lot of few, a lot of again, a lot of things I want to dive into. We don't have like so much time, but one, you said like it's like the thing. It's like the one first thing people start to see of your program rather than your website or other stuff like that now, and it's so important that one, you have a presence that like people show you're active and you're doing something, and two, is it interesting enough that like a kid or a parent would be excited to like get their kid in the program, or a kid would be excited to join it. And one way to do it, yeah, is have really cool content and things like that. But you could even just do it by like just being authentic and posting a notes app of like what's happening at the program. And if you have, like you said, great coaching and a great culture behind all of it, like that'll do just fine. So I think some people get caught up in trying to have like go from like 0 to 100 on their Instagram page, whereas like you said, like just be consistent, and like tell the story is really all you need to do to get started. And like you said, I mean the kids love it. I think the biggest thing though is like it's growing the game. Like social media spreads like wildfire. Kids will want to share it to their stories, and everyone in their school is going to be able to see it, whether they play lacrosse or not. And then it legitimizes what they're doing. Like, okay, they're actually have like photos and videos and cool gear, and like it legitimizes what they're doing. And then lastly, it gives people. I always say like give people an opportunity to show love to what you're doing or share what they're doing. So all you guys are doing is like putting out opportunities for kids to support their friends on their photos or college commitments and things like that. And then it shares like if you don't do it, then no one talks about Steelhead on a day-to-day basis because it doesn't pop up in their feed, and that's what they talk about. So I think all those things are really
Sure.
interesting, that you guys are doing well. And I think from a lacrosse landscape in general, like lacrosse is doing really well with content. That I follow a few like Illinois high school lacrosse content pages is insane. They're like these student videographers and like professional videographers,
Yeah.
and then kids across the state are like chirping each other in the comments, and I'm like, this is like exactly how you grow a game and like share and collaborate. It's really cool what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. I stay away from the chirping,
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I mean they're doing I mean kids these days are just like doing amazing things. Like I mean literally like I was at a St. Viator game the other night. They were playing New Trier. It's like a it's the top state matchup, and there was probably 5 to 6 videographer photographer kids that were probably all freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, just capturing content. And then literally like 24 hours later, like social media exploded with just video after photo gallery, and it's awesome. It's amazing. And like I said, we've been fortunate to work with some amazing people. And they've done a really great job for us. And like we kind of said, it's what the kids care about, but at the same time, it's surface level, but it's brand awareness, and you have to adjust to your market, and our market is media content driven. So from an entrepreneurial business perspective, you have to invest in it. If you're not willing to invest in it and go get quality content, and maybe pay a videographer or photographer, then you might be okay with whatever you're going to put out, without investing in it. But there's going to be a cooler club, or a more awesome club because of their awesome highlights and their awesome content, and they're promoting their players nonstop. And what are you guys doing? And we try not to compare apples to apples with what other people are doing. But the reality is on a business level, there's a market, and there's a market share, and people are competing for it. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to be that legitimate brand in the market.
hmm yeah. I encourage clubs to hire if they can't afford to hire someone professionally yet. Like just reach out to kids that are like maybe on the bench and injured, or like a younger age, and like just ask them to take their phone out and take some photos. Like they're doing it either way outside the field. Like they know how to work their phones. Like you don't need crazy content to start. Like just see how it goes, and you'll see a reaction right away. Like growing up, we got maybe one black and white photo in the newspaper like every season, and kids get excited about like getting in that newspaper that like nobody saw. And now, like you said, 24 hours later, you get like HD slow mo videos with music and like a lot of interactions, and kids from other schools can like share it, and like it's crazy. So you want to be part of the conversation, and it's a low barrier to entry. You can get really good quality stuff with professionals, but I always say start small and see how it goes. With again, like you said,
Oh
freshmen to
yeah,
high school can pull it
there
out.
are plenty. Yeah, there are plenty of options out there. I mean, all you got to do is scroll through social media, find somebody who posted some sort of sport photo, send them a DM. You know, they're probably a high school kid. Send them a DM like, "Hey, you love your stuff. Like, you know, would you come shoot a practice? Would you come shoot? You know?" And then if they've never shot lacrosse, then you know you bring them out to practice, and that's where they kind of start helping build your portfolio. It's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, yeah, super cool. I mean, lacrosse is just really awesome on Instagram with the content I'm seeing right now. I'm reaching out to a couple of people
Yeah,
recently.
yeah, there's a lot.
I'm interviewing one of them actually soon for like something like this because I'm just fascinated. All right, well, I could probably talk forever, get into a lot of these different topics, but we'll have to do a continued session. But thanks for like coming on and like sharing all of your insight experience. Was really fun and got me a lot of got me thinking about a lot more topics we could dive into. But yeah, I appreciate it. Anything you want to end on? Any messages?
Yeah, you know, first off, thanks for having me on. I mean, I love kind of just deep diving into, you know, lacrosse in general. I could talk about all day, and then you know what we do and who we are and why we do it. You know, I love sharing that and you know deep diving into that as well. You know, I would just say my like one couple of takeaways to leave on is you know if this is like an industry that you're interested in and you know maybe you're a young kid in college that like wants to dive into you know youth sports on a you know business entrepreneurial level. You know, I would say there's three things that like I've taken away over my years, and it's you know one, it's just always be honest even when it might not be what somebody wants to hear. It's always better to be honest than lie. And that goes for a lot of things, but especially in the youth sports industry. Second, over communicate is far better than no communication at all. And I think I've said that a couple of times throughout this interview is that if you can over communicate, trust me, parents are going to love and appreciate that a lot more than if you just didn't communicate at all. And then lastly, surround yourself with great people. You know, just as an example, you know, the people that I built Steelhead with and the coaches I have on staff, you know, a lot of them have been with us from the beginning, and you know they've believed in our mission, and honestly we've had a lot of fun doing it. So you know if you surround yourself with great people in these industries, you're going to have a lot of fun doing it, and it's going to be a lot, it's going to be a lot of work always, but it's a lot of fun too. So I would say those are my like three key takeaways for you know anybody that is thinking about it, going to do it, or wants to dive into this industry.
Love it. Okay, I was supposed to wrap up, but you got me one more question on those things. One on the honesty part. Anything specific like that toward honesty? I know you want to be honest in general, but what specifically came to mind to you in terms of honesty? Is that honesty towards parents or coaching? Like, what was what's the reason of you saying honesty?
Yeah, I mean it goes hand in hand in every direction. You know, from a like a business service perspective to a client perspective, right? You want to be honest with them and what you're providing and why you're providing it, right? You want to be, you know, over consistent with like your message of like, you know, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And for example, if a tournament gets canceled or you have to cancel practice or you know a coach can't be somewhere or you know for instance a kid tries out and maybe he didn't make the A team, maybe he makes the B team, right? Like being honest in those messages and explaining why those decisions were made are going to hold far longer and more important in your relationships than if you tried to lie your way through it. Oh, the tournament got canceled because the fields were bad. Well, maybe a parent knows somebody there, and maybe the fields weren't bad. Maybe you just decided you didn't want to go to that one because you didn't didn't like what weekend it was on, right? Like that's just a very small example of that, but like,
Mm-hmm.
that could go in many different directions. So the general consensus for me is like, in this industry and in those moments, you don't want to lie your way through those explanations. You want to be honest, and the more you can be transparent in those conversations, the more trust you're going to have over the long term. And like I said, it's not always going to be the easiest conversation. It's not always going to be the conversation you want to have, but it's going to build trust. And the families are might not like what they hear, but they're going to respect that you were transparent with them.
Yeah. Is there a quick little, what's like the hardest thing you had to be honest on to a parent where you're like, God, I don't want to be, I think it hurts to do this right now, but could you give me an example of when you had to be honest and it was hard?
Yeah, honestly, tryout season is always the hardest time of year. Not from a like execution, but from a after we don't necessarily cut kids, but we divvy up kids into different teams based on skill level, right? Just from a competitive travel club perspective, just like everyone else does. So those are usually some of the hardest conversations I have to have because, as much as we might love a kid and their family and everything they do and they support us immensely, he might not be ready for the A team, right? He might still have to be on the B team, and maybe their expectation was that he was going to be on the A team, right? Like, so you never know what those expectations are as a family, but they're always some of the hardest conversations to have from like a coach perspective, because you have to be honest. You have to be honest, and sometimes that's not always easy, and sometimes you want to kind of like take the easy way out of like making an excuse for it. But like I said, the reality is sometimes like the more transparent you can be in the like in that exact moment of like, here's maybe the things he needs to continue to work on to possibly have that opportunity to like move up a team. They're going to respect that a lot more than if you tried to lie your way through that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, last thing I want to dive into is not dive completely, but you said surround yourself with great people. How would you describe a great person for like building a program with versus somebody that you would want to stay away from adding into your culture?
Yeah. I think it's less about who to stay away from, because you don't always know everybody, right? Until you really start to get to know them. Um, but it's more about the people you do know and how to get them involved. So for instance, like we don't necessarily have just like an open, job application at all times to like, hey, you want to coach? Like, come on board. We need coaches. I don't know you, but like, we need staff. Like that doesn't happen with like at Steelhead, at least. If you're a coach for us, it's probably because either I know you, or somebody I trust or know in the industry recommended you, or a friend of a friend recommended you, right? Or even like, I have relationships with kids that I coached 8 or 9 years ago that come back and want to coach, later in life. And yeah, I know them because I coached them. So they're going to have the same values from a coaching perspective because they spent, a handful of years with me, as a coach in general. So, I would say it's a lot more about just when we look for instance, just real base level example, when we look for coaches, when we look for staff, I care a lot less about your resume as a lacrosse player or where you've coached, and I care a lot more about you kind of as a person. And again, that's really hard to gauge at a like surface level if like you don't know that person. And so like there's usually a process to it. It's, well, I need you to come out to a practice, and like, you're not going to have to lead a practice, but like I want to watch you engage with the kids. I want to interact with you during a practice. I want my staff to interact with you during practice. I want to see how the kids interact with you. I want to see how you interact with the kids. And again, like I don't necessarily care if like you played Division 1 lacrosse. I care that you're personable. My kids appreciate like your interactions with them. My parents appreciated like your interactions with their kids and them off the field? And then my honestly my coaching staff, like does my coaching staff appreciate you being here and like us kind of hanging out, like like that's how I look at like at like our staff, like none of like my other than myself, and maybe one other person, like everyone else is part time, so they do this because they love it and they do it because they love lacrosse and want to stay connected to it, but they have other things that they could be doing. They have full-time jobs and they have families, and they could easily be not at practice on a Tuesday night, but they decide to be there. And honestly, I hope that that's because of the atmosphere we've kind of built from a like from again just kind of like a surround yourself with great people atmosphere. We want our coaches to enjoy it, because honestly that all correlates back to how they coach, right? Like if they're not having fun doing it, they're not going to have fun coaching, and the kids are going to get the reflection of that, and the parents are going to see that, and then it comes back to me, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
snowball effect. So that's on a 30,000 foot looking down level of like what does surround yourself with great people kind of look like to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Would you say that people do toss people into those roles because they need staff? Would you rather not fill a role and stretch your hours than fill it with somebody that is just more of a body on the sideline?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're definitely a testament to that. I think in our first 2 years, essentially, we had, we had like four coaches. And in year one, that wasn't a problem because we only had four teams that first year.
Mm-hmm.
We had, two high school and two youth, and that was that. And we were able to figure it all out with just logistics. But as we've grown, that second year we went from four to, eight teams, and we didn't really like add much staff. So, we all kind of had to figure it out. And, luckily now, that we've grown even more, we're in a really good place just kind of as an established club, that we've had more people reach out to help, and, buddies of buddies that are
Mm-hmm.
already coaching for us wanted to get involved, and, recommendations from other people in the industry for a coach that lives up by us wanted to get involved, and right, like, and now we have a really strong coaching network for us and a coaching staff for us, and we've really enjoyed that this year. But yeah, I think to answer that question, the first 2 years of Steelhead was kind of a testament to that, is that we coached every team,
Mm-hmm.
and we still kind of coach every team, and honestly we like it that way. We love knowing our players from the 9-year old all the way to our senior in high school. We love knowing our families, and we love knowing the kids faces and knowing their names, and being on their sidelines, and hyping them up, even if we aren't the head coach. Like, we got guys from tournaments that go run over to the next game because they want to hype up the team, and hype up the kids, because we know them all. We
Yeah.
interact with them every single practice, across the board. We don't just have a coach that shows up for 1 hour and then he leaves. So yeah, to answer your question, we've definitely stretched ourselves thin the first 2 years, but again, we've enjoyed getting to know all of our players.
Well, to wrap it up nicely, then, like that is also a great definition of culture of how the staff is focused on the players and will be there for the players even when they're not coaching. Awesome. I went way over time, but I appreciate you going in depth and sharing all this info. And hopefully I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me, Adam.
All right. Talk soon.